Pokemon's gender and breeding systems attempt to match the reproduction of real-life organisms. The system is a simplification and approximation to make the games playable and easier to comprehend for everyone. This is helpful when accounting for the compatibility of breeding Pokemon of different species, especially certain species that are pretty abstract. There's a lot of real-world boundaries that are less strict in the Pokemon world. For real-world reproduction, the species difference is a large boundary when it comes to creating viable offspring. For even something as seemingly similar as a horse and a donkey, the result is only an infertile mule, a genetic dead end. Horses have 64 chromosomes and donkeys have 62 chromosomes, so when they average out to 63 for the mule, the result is usually sterility. That's a genetic compatibility issue. That seems to be the main angle that Pokemon tries to use when creating the egg groups that determine compatibility for breeding. Other factors seem to be considered, but not as much. In the real world, behavior differences, temporal isolation, ecological isolation, and having the wrong lock and key are the other reasons that prevent reproduction. In Pokemon, as long as there is a male and female in the same egg group or a ditto with anything outside of the undiscovered egg group, offspring can appear. All Pokemon are shown to have hard-shelled eggs as the reproductive norm regardless of real-world counterparts, so this is also part of the simplification. This simplification makes it pretty easy to grasp just from playing the games for a while. So why am I bringing up all of this now? Well, it's because this game's simplified system around breeding also has to interact with some pretty complex gender mechanics and Pokemon lore that heavily contradicts the gender and reproduction mechanics. We're going to start with simple examples and work our way up to the more complex ones since each topic builds on the last. A small disclaimer that I shouldn't have to make, but must do anyway. This is a video primarily about the Pokemon universe, game mechanics, and how they compare to our world. In English localizations, the series uses the expression gender differences instead of a formal term like dimorphism to describe the differences between male and female. While I may need to make comparisons to animals and biologies of the real world, I will mostly be using the word gender in an all-encompassing way to talk about male and female, non-human, living things found in nature. This keeps the topic focused on the biology of non-humans, avoids using words that would cause YouTube to demonetize content that is free for viewers like you, and keeps the video more easily comprehensible to as many people as possible. This video is not about humans nor human societies. By extension, none of the discussion within is about human gender nor human classifications of any kind. In other words, one can be wise without being pedantic. Thank you. First, we will talk about Combee and Vespiquen. We know that they are based on the eusocial honeybees, but luckily it's only loosely based on bees. Only female Combee are able to evolve into a Vespiquen because it's supposed to represent the queen bees. All Combee, male or female, function as worker bees. The Pokemon world has them as a simple hierarchy, the queen and everyone else. For real bees, they still do have the female queen who has consumed royal jelly until developing into a queen, and the common female worker bees that make the switch to honey and pollen. Young worker bees actually have a gland that produces royal jelly to feed to young, so they are occasionally called nurse bees because they stay in the hive to clean and care for larvae. When they can no longer produce royal jelly, they then focus on building honeycomb cells, and as they get older, they climb the corporate bee ladder. They can look forward to being promoted to the reception that receives parcels of nectar and pollen from foraging bees, or being a guard to the hive. It's really fascinating that the foraging bees, the random ones we are likely to come across, are some of the oldest bees from the hive. I would have thought the younger ones would do all the busy work and the old ones would do the more sedentary work. There are also drones, which are the male bees that exist purely for reproduction. They don't clean, contribute to making food, or do anything at all other than carry some chromosomes for reproduction with a queen. The queen is capable of storing drone reproductive material and can selectively choose to fertilize or not fertilize any egg that is laid. It would certainly be a huge pain to players if only certain female Combee could become Vespiquen, so let's be grateful it was only a simple reference. Next we have the Salandit Line. They're based on salamanders, and many salamanders are poisonous. There's also an abundance of media depictions of legendary fire salamanders. Poison fire type, yes we know. There's also the connection where Alolan Pokemon pull inspiration from Hawaiian reality and legends, so Salazzle could reference the Mo'o, a type of shapeshifter that has a particular particularly relevant transformation in their arsenal, the ability to change from a black-scaled female lizard into a very attractive woman to seduce and devour men. This could also be why Salazzle's ability to lure and seduce males doesn't stop at just Salandits, and also extends to a class of unspecified opponents, according to the Scarlet version Pokédex entry. According to new Pokemon Snap, a Salazzle's pheromone gas smells sweet even to humans, with no distinction to that entry made between a chosen male or female protagonist. It also says on the Sun and Moon official website, even the Japanese one, that Salandit is able to release pheromones that can afflict even human males. Moving on, Salazzle and Salandit as a line seems to draw inspiration from species of whiptails that can be mostly or entirely female. Since they also wanted to create the seduced and enslaved male harem lore for Salazzle, only the female Salandits can evolve into a Salazzle, and they made the male to female gender ratio for Salandit 7:1. I'm using the expression male harem because it's more precise, faster to type, and faster to say than the other term. The lore claims that this female exclusive evolution is because only female Salandits and Salazzle can release this snow bunny hypnosis pheromone gas, with Salazzles naturally being stronger. The male Salandits give up too much food, energy, and resources to properly fuel their own evolution and are stunted by this domination. This leads to really interesting implications. First off, these male harems could also serve as a form of polyandry that is meant to give one female Salazzle a massive stockpile of male Salandit genetic material. Many real-world reptile species engage in polyandry and long-term genetic material storage. Salazzle fight with other Salazzle to have the largest harem, so there is potential that they don't store the material and need the carriers of material actively around for reproduction. The male harem is the Salazzle's army and working class, so it's unclear whether long-term genetic material storage is a factor or not, so we need more information to confirm that theory. Another potential implication is that there could be a male Salandit evolution in the future. Imagine if Salandit are introduced to a new region, perhaps a region that is way windier and way more rainy, maybe windy and wavy enough to make them the Generation 10 namesake. If this environment interfered with the ability for female Salandits to use their pheromones to control male Salandit, wouldn't the males potentially be able to eat more and evolve now? Salazzle is speedy, specially offensive, and uses mind control to gain power and resources from the uniquely female ability of the species. Maybe the male can evolve into a Salazzle. Well, no, the name would need to be different. Salazzle is a dazzling, sizzling salamander, or an enchanting newt if you're Japanese. So let's call the hypothetical Pokemon Salambast, because it's a salamander that lambasts the opponent. I should note here that lambast is thought to come from lamb and bast, to beat violently and to beat severely with the whip. It has the connotation of a severe verbal lashing, pun not intended, but maybe it's similar to how people use roast, slam, blast, tear into, flame, bash, destroy, own, and other physical words to describe strong speech or words. Back to Salambast, the male's lack of a special, oriented, offensive, and chemical mind manipulation pheromone powers could develop into a drastically different body type and stat spread. I'm not an artist and definitely not someone who draws in the Pokemon art style, but I couldn't find a Pokemon artist with open commissions. So for now, here's a simple sketch to help you visualize what we're going to be talking about. I made him a big, brawny lizard similar to the physically oriented Incineroar and Okidogi. I'm leaning into the dimorphism in the design because that's the gimmick of the species. We can see that Salandit either have a marking or thin membrane that follows the organ in their tail. This organ launches out fire and poison gas. Salazzle maintains the ability to shoot poison and fire, but evolves to have a color that is more of a feminine coded magenta. The shape of it is still fiery, but it also looks butterfly-like or like a swimsuit, particularly when models hike the sides of the swimsuit way past the hips and up to the navel region. The lizard even has eyeliner now. This is all to emphasize that feminine seduction goes along with fire and poison abilities. Since the male has no snow bunny hypnosis, the design should probably focus on fire, poison, and physical strength. It will still be a mostly black and gray volcanic lizard and keep the red-orange lava vent tones of Salandit. No, I'm not adding blue to the design because boy equals blue is heavy-handed and would be a disservice to the lava lizard theme and the species. Besides, we could save blue and purple for a poison ice regional variant of the Salandit line, which would also finally actually give us our first poison-ice dual type. Maybe some cold region based on Iceland or Russia, with volcanic vents that spew poison gas could be their habitat. Something like a frozen sulfur spring cave or a volcanic basin where heavy, dense toxic gases settle. That could be a topic for another video. Back to Salambast, I've expanded on the fiery markings Salandit has, and kept the rest of the body closer to the stereotypically male tones of red and purple. I made the chest marking a fire-shaped marking almost like trimmed chest hair. The arms have fiery forearm hair looking markings. I saw that on this Pokemon card of Salazzle, her palms and soles are magenta, so I made Salambast have colored palms and soles too. The tail is thicker since the entire family of this species learns Fire Lash, and even Salazzle is said to actively use its tail as a weapon to lash. Salambast would likely be using his tail, jaws, and forearms to deal physical damage. Maybe the physical strikes have a secondary fire or poison burst to them, like the gun lances from Monster Hunter. I imagine that, like Salazzle and many other lizards, he mainly runs and climbs using all four legs. Salambast, crawling around with his large arms, would have an imposing gait like the gait we see in those clips of Yveltal's Wyvern Walk. They can occasionally slightly stand on just two legs for certain actions such as monitoring their surroundings, attacking with their forearms, or pouncing. This isn't the only possible way the dimorphism of Salambast could manifest. Maybe the dimorphism could be a physical glass cannon, a physical bruiser, or some kind of tanky defensive wall. Would they develop female harems, with the males competing to engage in polygyny? Would they even be aggressive at all? Are they a species that looks super imposing and intimidating, but behavior-wise are chill giant teddy bears until they get pissed and need to fight? We can only theorize for now, but it is fun to think about how severe the dimorphism could be for the species. The Nidoran Lines were the originals when it came to dimorphism in Pokemon games. It was more than the modern gender difference mechanic. Nidoran male and Nidoran female were two distinct species with their own evolutionary lines. Even after introducing breeding in Generation 2, the two lines still have different Pokédex numbers and entries that need to be filled to count towards completion. Curiously, Nidorina and Nidoqueen were, and still, are unable to breed. If you want to make more Nidoran of either gender, you need to use a female Nidoran with a male Pokemon in a matching egg group, or any member of the male Nidoran line with a Ditto to get eggs. A book produced by Creatures Inc., which is a key affiliate of most Pokemon content, specifies that Nidorina and Nidoqueen are unable to produce eggs, but a Nidoran female can. We know this book as An Illustrated Book of Pocket Monsters, which came out in 1996 for Japanese audiences. In 1997, we also got promotional material of baby Nidoran that don't actually appear in the game, but are some mixed color between Nidoran male and Nidoran female. Nidoran in the game always pop out as a Nidoran male or a Nidoran female, so maybe this is anime or manga only? Either way, it has stayed consistent that Nidorina and Nidoqueen lack fertility, and even now they remain in the undiscovered egg group. So the question is why? Why did the species evolve to have the reproductive traits that they have in universe? Is it just something simple like an extremely early menopause? Does it somehow consume all their fertility to evolve? The information on Nidorina and Nidoqueen emphasize their intense instinct to feed and protect young, so maybe the act of creating eggs as Nidoran female triggers the urgent need to evolve quickly to guarantee the safety of the young. It could be some kind of all-or-nothing strategy where the trade-off is losing fertility for overwhelming strength. If their young perish, that's it. Alternatively, they could reproduce young, then the Nidorina and Nidoqueen are like the aunts and elders that watch over the young of Nidoran female. It could be a system where Nidorina and Nidoqueen act similar to soldier ants, biologically female but reproductively sterile and focused on combat. The male Nidoran line functions like how we'd expect, where they are highly aggressive protectors of their herd, and for some reason do not lose their ability to fertilize eggs. What an interesting situation this group of species are in. Volbeat and Illumise are capable of reproducing to create more Volbeat and Illumise. All Volbeat are male, and all Illumise are female. The gender dimorphism is so large that they are treated like different species, with no pre-evolution or evolution where they converge. They hatch into different species similar to Nidoran male versus Nidoran female and follow the same breeding rules. Illumise can breed with any compatible Pokémon, and the gender of the baby determines the species. If you have no Illumise, a Volbeat and a Ditto is required to breed. They've mechanically had some changes related to how breeding works, but at this point the games and media have more parity, so this species is definitely a dimorphic pair. Insects are sometimes so dimorphic they can be mistaken as different species. Here's an image of two species of fireflies and how they present based on gender. Look at how this one almost looks like it has the bob haircut on Illumise, and how this one looks like it has the collar of Volbeat. I found these examples in a paper about the levels of dimorphism expressed in fireflies, and I'd recommend checking it out if the topic interests you. The link is in the description. The key point is that we don't consider these highly dimorphic subjects different species in the real world. Pokémon, especially Generation 6 and onwards, has definitely been more confident about having highly dimorphic Pokémon with different appearances, moves, abilities, and stats occupy the same Pokédex entry. Meowstic and Indeedee are examples of more recent Pokémon that don't get classified as two separate species with two Pokédex entries. This is also a good time to mention that Latios and Latias are counterparts that likely can reproduce. It's just not allowed in-game because they are legendary. If they weren't legendary, they'd probably be like Volbeat and Illumise, where they are counterpart species due to dimorphism and follow the same egg-laying rules. Tauros and Miltank have to be addressed because they are bulls and cows. They are not like the Nidoran Line, and they are not even like the Volbeat and Illumise situation. They are treated as completely different and unrelated species of 100% male bulls and 100% female cows. They follow the usual breeding rules where Miltank is female, so you can use any compatible male or Ditto to make more, and Tauros is male, so you need a Ditto to breed more. The Pokédex mentions that Miltank will produce milk that is more nutritious than usual if it has just had a baby. And while we aren't supposed to think about it, it does sound a lot like the live birth of a calf. Maybe one day we'll get a baby calf Pokémon that will evolve into Tauros if male, or Miltank if female. I wonder what would be required to affect a Paldean version of that calf to become one of the specific breeds of Paldean Tauros. Kangaskhan is a species of Pokémon with a 100% female gender ratio. Unlike other species we've covered that have canon male counterparts, or at least something that looks like it could be a male counterpart thematically, we've allegedly only seen females. The species has Pokédex entries that specify that the females will have pouches and carry their young for 3 years. They will also be very sad about these babies leaving. This is strange since we see Kangaskhan very frequently in large female herds, so why would the young ones even need to leave the herd? In no form of media do we see a confirmed male Kangaskhan, leaving it dubious if we haven't seen them or if they are another species, like Nidoking versus Nidoqueen. Are males isolated wandering traders, but for genetic material? While large tribes of females act as villages to trade exotic material with? Or do the babies that reach maturity and leave after 3 years go to find a wandering male just for the material, then form a new all-female maternity herd? We see that if Kangaskhan Mega evolves, the child gets the energy and becomes a pouchless little fighter. Is this a young male, or does a female Kangaskhan develop a pouch after full reproductive maturity? Are Kangaskhan a species of Pokémon that can change their gender? In the nature of our world, there are species that specifically can change gender to enable reproduction. Protandry is an organism starting life male, then later becoming female. Protogeny is when an organism starts life female, then later becomes male. When animals engage in either shift, many things can possibly happen. Body parts can physically transform, hormone profiles shift, coloration changes, behavior changes, social roles change, brain structures can reorganize, genes can reorganize. We see this with clownfish, where a large male may change into a female, which is beneficial because the larger the fish, the more cavity space there is to store eggs. In the case of Kangaskhan, it could be a species that is also protandrous. It would help explain quite a few things. All along, we may have been seeing male Kangaskhan, just not in the way we would expect. Let's walk through the hypothetical. Kangaskhan are born male with male brains, male parts, male coloration, male genes, male hormones, and male social roles. The baby is a pastel lavender gray tone in base form and in mega form. This could be following the strategy in nature where males display bright, bold colors to appeal to the females. The females don't have to earn reproductive access, they are the egg layers after all, so they can be simple and plain looking to be less obvious to predators. The Mega Evolved baby is also behaviorally bold and combative, and its only skills are combat related. This is in contrast to the female that is competent at combat as intimidation and physical deterrence to enemies, but behaviorally has a nurturing, peaceful, and maternal baseline. That belly armor instead of a pouch could be the result of dimorphism. This could be what the young male looks like when it's time to leave the pouch and go off into the world alone to fight and reproduce. After surviving and growing to terminal size and peak reproductive maturity as a male, it has demonstrated the fitness to survive and pass on genes to females of its species while living an isolated life. Then after establishing that it is evolutionarily fit to be approved by the reproductive gatekeepers and contributing male material, it then changes to become an approved gatekeeper itself. It then shifts the hormones and genes to become a female. It changes coloration from a standout pastel lavender to an earthy brown, temperament from feisty and instigating to nurturing and defensive, belly morphology from armored abdominals to a plush pouch, the habits of living solitary to living in a herd once more. It's like a way to doubly make sure that only the fittest survive. Usually for other species, surviving is good enough to reproduce. The females generally need to survive at all. The males need to survive, procure resources, fight other males, and sacrifice themselves to get access. Different struggles and jobs that they are arbitrarily born into. However, if the Kangaskhan life cycle is like this hypothetical, then there's a new gender role paradigm. The next generation of females and gatekeepers to the fitness of the species to survive isn't just a birthright by nature of being born female. It's earned by every single Kangaskhan. Every single Kangaskhan has to work to perform and qualify as a successful male to earn the right to select or gatekeep males as a female with reproductive authority. It's a pretty elegant cycle, and this would happen over and over. The males are nurtured until they are self-sufficient. The young males live in isolation and fend for themselves to prove their fitness without the support of another. They either prove their worth and get vetted and granted reproductive access by the females, or they don't. The ones that aren't fit either keep trying until they are fit enough, or die without passing on genes. The ones that are fit and worthy to pass on do contribute their material to existing females. After successful cycles of male reproduction and aging, their biology sees them fit and experienced enough to shift to a female. The shift happens because they are not at their young adult peak physical fitness anymore, so aggression and performance are less viable. However, they are still not infertile and geriatric, just a more nurturing age. Now as experienced, middle-aged, and still fertile adults, they are able to properly gatekeep, assess, and select valuable male mates as the new females. They form a matriarchal herd like elephants and orcas do to compensate for their less physically oriented forms with sheer numbers. The Kangaskhan now have something like a tribunal of females that each have both male and now female lived wisdom to properly raise and prepare the next generation of males. Then that next generation of males will prove their worth and success to be males worthy of reproduction, and later females worthy of selecting worthy males for reproduction. It's kind of like how experienced lawyers become court judges, and now as court judges they oversee lawyers in court. Another example would be pro athletes past their prime. Some of them are still pretty healthy and strong compared to the average person, but can't compete physically with the upcoming youthful pros at their peak, so they retire and take on a mentorship role. It's a tough life for a Kangaskhan, but this definitely makes sure all of them are as qualified as possible as an entire species regardless of gender. Perhaps the most egalitarian species of any life form if this insane hypothetical were ever confirmed to be true in the future. I call it crazy, but it somehow makes more sense than Nidoran female being the only fertile female in that whole evolution line. Okay, just some final notes to wrap up things related to Kangaskhan. When we look at how breeding works in-game, we see that this species has the same problem as Pokemon like Farfetch'd and Cubone, where they have to hatch already holding or having their defining traits. In Kangaskhan's case, it's being born with a child. It's pretty reasonable to just call this video game logic inconvenience, because the game would be unplayable if you had to competitively breed for both a good IV and nature Kangaskhan parent and child to be able to make use of a good Mega Kangaskhan. The math of parental bond makes the child's attack proportional to the attacks of the parent, so they would have the exact same IVs in nature. Taking this at face value that Kangaskhan hatches as an adult adult with a baby would potentially imply that this is some weird evolutionary trait where Kangaskhan are born as a type of twins from a single egg, and that the baby is something like a mammalian version of a drone bee that develops slower than a female. That all along professors saw something baby-like and assumed that this was a baby when it actually was just a neotenous male, as if this was some kind of anglerfish type situation where the male attaches and becomes a reproductive organ now part of the female. This is technically another hypothetical answer, but one I feel is way too contrived and unsatisfying for me to personally explain. I'm going to address the ghost Marowak in the room and at least mention that I'm aware of the whole theory about orphaned baby Kangaskhan wearing their mother's skull to become a Cubone. If the theory is true, then it makes perfect sense that something orphaned and malnourished wouldn't act or develop properly into a Kangaskhan, like how Salandit is too malnourished to reach its final form. The skull fuses with the Pokemon when it evolves into either Marowak, so it definitely can't become a Kangaskhan. Because of the stunted growth, unhealed trauma of this lineage, and lack of support systems in herds, reproduction, care, and protection is likely more difficult, resulting in high mortality rates. I'm not getting too into it because it's been covered extensively by basically everyone else who talks about Pokemon, so I'm sure no one is starving for content about this theory. Manaphy and Phione are a really strange case. Normally, the reproduction of legendary or mythical Pokemon are left vague or are exclusive to things outside of game mechanics. The video games have blocked the ability to breed legendaries by refusing to gender many of them and by putting them in the undiscovered egg groups. Specifically in the case of Manaphy, we received an event egg that we could transfer from Pokemon Ranger into Diamond and Pearl to hatch a Manaphy. If you put that Manaphy with a Ditto, you can endlessly create more Phione. Those Phione, however, will never evolve, transform, or produce a Manaphy in-game. We know this is video game gatekeeping, so let's try to think about this from the frame of the greater Pokemon world. Manaphy and Phione have a relationship that appears to be like a colony. Manaphy is more like a queen, able to produce a related but lower caste of drone-like beings. Manaphy is called the Prince of the Sea, so is it maybe a dominant male capable of choosing whether it just induces unfertilized ovulation in the Phione to make more Phione and fertilizes to make a new King Manaphy? The Prince of the Sea may be a nickname that is anthropomorphizing a species that may actually be genderless even in the anime. Manaphy is born in cold oceans and Phione hangs out in warm oceans. Some reptiles have their gender influenced by the temperature during their development. Even though Manaphy and Phione are aquatic sea invertebrates, maybe water temperature affects the caste. There could also be some other chemical or environmental system that makes a Phione ascend into a Manaphy. Some kind of royal sea jelly that the players don't have access to that allows a Phione to become a Manaphy. It's hard to say what the reason is, but even as recently as Generation 8, they have appeared alongside each other, like a colony, with castes. The final group we will quickly mention is Carbink and Diancie. It is said that the spontaneous mutation of Carbink becomes a Diancie. We don't know why or how. It's rare and it seems to make them unable to breed even with a Ditto. Regardless, Carbink will follow them around anyway like a queen. I'm not aware of caste systems where a mutation creates an infertile, queen-like figure for a species. However, Carbink are genderless fairy minerals formed underground that can reproduce with Dittos, so there isn't really a dimorphism to explain here. They're just metamorphic gems forming inside rock, and that's kind of the end of it. If you didn't know, now you know. It's fascinating how many things about Pokemon have been left unexplained and we all kind of just accepted that it didn't need an answer. This whole video idea came from someone asking me a bunch of questions about breeding because they were trying to hunt shiny Pokemon through breeding. They wanted to understand how to hunt for specifically male or female forms of certain shiny Pokemon before they started the grind. The more I answered their questions, the more I realized this is all stuff that is truly more memorization than logic and consistency, and so here we are, you all get this video. What are your thoughts on some of these increasingly strange systems and results of implementing gender and breeding into Pokemon? We've covered a lot, so it's fine if you don't know how to respond. A reminder that there's a link to that Firefly paper and other useful things in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you some other time. Bye!